Hello my dear students. Today in this class we will be discussing about soil resources of India. As soil a very important natural resource on which we see the vegetation grows and most importantly the agricultural activities are carried out. So this class we will be discussing about soils and their formation and also about various causes that leads to soil erosion, a major problem, and also its conservation. So let's define soil first. What is soil? It is a loose material that covers the top layer of the earth's crust, or you can say it is the loose material that forms the upper layer of the earth's crust. Its formation in fact mostly depends on the parent materials, time, relief, climate and vegetative covers. As when we talk about parent materials and time, it plays a very important role because soil does not form within a short span of time. It takes a longer time period for the formation of soil. With the parent materials, mostly the rock compositions of the earth's crust, when they crumble into pieces because of weathering and erosion, results in the formation of finer materials, and to that is what we call soil. Soil's composition, if we see, in terms of inorganic composition, we see that silica, clay and calcium mostly forms the inorganic composition of the soil, while humus, which is known as the dead remains of plants and animals, makes up the organic material. Now the presence of humus in a soil determines the fertility of a soil. If the humus content is more, then we find that the fertility of the soil is also high. Now let us discuss about soil erosion and the causes along with the conservation method that we need to follow. The first thing that we will discuss about the soil erosion, or in fact the first agent that causes soil erosion in massive case, is running water. We all know water is so important to us in terms of as an element that supports life. But equally it also results in many problems that comes across when uncontrolled. So this running water, due to heavy rainfall or overflooding of rivers, it causes erosion of the soil. Now this running water, which mostly is the water that forms that comes as a part of rainwater or the flooded water, acts in three different manners in causing erosion. Let us discuss them all together one by one. So the first one to be discussed is splash erosion. You see heavy rainfall that occurs in a place with that larger droplets of water. It falls on the ground, sometimes also associated with hailstone, and they dig the soil or they carve the soil out, and that is how erosion takes place, and that type is known as splash erosion. Well, this loose material is very easily carried out by the river water or is very easily carried out by surface runoff. That is, the water that flows on the earth's surface, known as surface runoff. So this loose material that very easily gets carried out of the top layer of the soil or the earth's crust is known as sheet erosion. While the third is the gully erosion that we talk about. Gullies are actually the small forms of rivers that forms basically during heavy rainfall. So what happens is the river water or the rainfall water, which runs along the slope of the hills, downhill in fact, with its velocity, it carves out small openings as a form of river. It forms a small channel cutting the valleys deep with steep-sided walls. And through this small channels, the water flows. The rainfall water, it flows. And that small channel that forms because of this rainfall water which flows down the hill is known as gullies. So when these several gullies are formed, in one particular place, it completely disrupts the agricultural activities, thereby forming the bad land topographies. So how can we prevent this? So the conservation method to prevent this is by constructions of dams and barrages to control the flow of the water, that is the velocity of the water. In most of the rivers we get to see that during heavy rainfall they get overflooded. So this overflooding of water can be very easily controlled by constructions of dams and barrages. The next off is the erosion mostly takes place in an open area which is devoid of vegetations. So this open areas where such erosion takes place by running water can be covered by growing trees. So we can say afforestation can take place as very important and effective method to control the soil erosion by running water. The second is by winds. Second agent that causes massive erosion is winds, and winds mostly causes erosion in drier areas where rainfall is less. So here what happens is, these winds, whenever they blows over an extensive areas, they carry out the finer loose material that makes up the top layer of the soil. This becomes very effective mostly in the desert areas because rainfall is very less. This also affects the agriculture as the top fertile layer of the soil is completely washed out by the winds that blows. So how can we prevent them? This form of soil erosion that are mostly caused by winds in the vast extensive areas of agricultural lands can be prevented with the help of shelter belts. The technical term that we use is shelter belts. So what is shelter belts? This is growing of trees. This is growing of trees around the agricultural land, the extensive agricultural land around which trees can be grown is known as shelter belts. This controls the velocity of the wind and thereby protects the agricultural land from losing its fertility. The third factor or the agent that causes is overgrazing of animals and human activities. We know overgrazing of animals mostly is carried out by goats and cows that goes on grazing in a ranch or in the grassland areas. This results in the uprooting of the grasses, which thereafter leaves the land exposed to erosion. So there, wind, either of it, wind or running water can play a very important role in causing erosion. So how can we conserve? It's simple, overgrazing can be checked. And the next, what we can do, now we cannot say that the animals should not be grazing, or it is not that we should not be feeding animals with grasses. Rather, what we can do is we can leave some open spaces where grasses can grow, and that place can be acting as the grazing grounds rather than the actual forest covers. In terms of human activities, we see construction and cutting of trees and even plowing of agricultural fields. These also leads to erosive action by wind or by running water. So there, mostly afforestation plays a very important role, that is by growing trees. And the last cause for soil erosion, in fact, we can say this is a part of human activity that we follow, and this is faulty methods of agriculture. Now see, what we get to know is the world, in fact the world's population, the maximum of them are involved in agricultural activities. So this is where a major concern comes also along because with the erosion that takes place. What we see is mostly there are several methods which acts as a faulty method in terms of agricultural practice that leads to soil erosion, like shifting of agriculture, which is also known as slash and burn. In this case, what happens is the forests are actually cleared. They are cut and then the remnants are burned, hence known as slash and burn. So shifting agriculture becomes a major concern because after the agricultural practice in one part of the forest, that land is left barren without growing the trees in that particular place, and hence that piece of land gets exposed to erosion. And this shifting agriculture is mostly predominant in northeastern part of India and is also known as jhuming. The next is lack of crop rotation and then wrong plowing method. So the conservation method that we can follow, or what is the conservation that we can go follow in order to protect soil from faulty methods of agriculture. The first thing is shifting agriculture should be banned. It should not at all be allowed to be carried out. The second is where we see the wrong plowing method as a faulty methods of agriculture, we can follow a proper method that is known as contour plowing. The third is crop rotation method. Crop rotation method, it means that we should not be growing the same crop in the same piece of land time and again, or not every time we grow the same crop in one particular place. If we keep changing the crop in one particular piece of land, then that becomes much effective as crop rotation keeps maintaining the soil fertility. The fourth one is planting of cover crops. This is like after the agricultural season, we should not leave the agricultural land barren without growing anything. That leads to the exposure of the extensive land for erosive action. Hence, we should be growing some cover crops like fodders to the animals, or we can grow some leguminous plants which rather would be adding nitrogen into the soil, which is known as nitrogen fixation. The fifth one is terrace farming in the hills. In the hill slope areas where the running water becomes an effective agent for erosion to be caused, in this case, to control the water flow, we can cut the land as terraces, a step-like structure which will control the flow of water. These are the conservation methods that can be followed. So here class, we had to discuss about soil and the causes of erosion and their conservation method. So this is it for the day.